I have updated my Superflex rookie-only rankings. And here's the thing. I have updated all of my rookie-only rankings. We're going to talk about the Superflex version right now. Top 3 are still the same. Bijan Robinson, Anthony Richardson, Jahmyr Gibbs. I've got Bryce Young and CJ Stroud right behind them. JSN as the top wide receiver is number 6 in Superflex. Then it goes Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Quentin Johnston, Jonathan Mingo, Zach Charbonnet, and Devon Achane. How did I do on that name, Dave?
That's perfect. Devon Achane.
Devon Achane. So the first thing, we kind of already talked about this. Now let's start with Dalton Kincaid. Dan, you get to start. Dave can go second, but you were just saying how much you love Dalton Kincaid. I said this in May. I just don't think I'm drafting rookie tight ends in the first round of rookie-only drafts. I don't believe that Dalton Kincaid is going to be a full-time slot receiver and earn 100 targets, and I think he's going to be cheaper in 18 months.
I don't hate the idea of trying to buy him in 18 months. My only issue with that is I've done this a lot in Dynasty where I've tried to play the market perfect kind of in that sense, like you just brought up, Heath, where you're like, I love this guy, but I know these factors are going to lead to a slow start, so let's buy him then. And then when you get to that point of trying to buy the player, the manager is coming back to you with, well, am I really going to sell him now at his lowest? And the answer is typically no. And they almost never do because, and maybe you can kind of craft your own trade and give them more than the expectation time, but it seems to not work out. So I want to get these players before any of that. I'm not going to try to perfectly play the market. And for me with Kincaid, what you need here is for sure an outlier. You're right, Heath. Buying in a first round tight end, even in Dynasty, obviously in redraft, we know how poor that's been. Even in Dynasty, has been great. But I think he can and will be that outlier. And I know that's a crazy thing to say because you're banking on an outlier. But things that he has that other tight ends who have failed in the past don't have is one, Josh Allen as his quarterback for a minimum of 5 years. That is an incredible thing to have, an elite passer as your quarterback for 5 years in Dynasty. 2, Gabe Davis will hit free agency this offseason. Very unlikely to be re-signed. They have cap issues, the Bills. They do not have enough cap space to add a second receiver in a big contract, considering the wide receiver market. So now we have a potential for right away, year 2, Dalton Kincaid getting the second most targets on the roster on a Josh Allen-led offense. And then 3, he has the film to back it up. You watch him on tape, and he looks like a wide receiver out there, just a bigger version of one. Someone who gets open in the middle of the field, someone who understands spatial awareness, how to beat zone coverage, where to sit. And then after the catch, he's really interesting player. He's kind of reminds me of like a Zach, he's had the comparison to Zach Ertz. I kind of see it, but guy has so much more juice than Zach Ertz. I don't really love the comparison. He's better. He's a bigger weapon with more upside after the catch. So when those 3 factors are working for me, elite quarterback, potential path towards number 2 targets in year 2, or towards second most targets in year 2, and the tape to back it up, it's a player I love in Dynasty.
And I think that the people who draft Kincaid are going to think just like Dan, and they're hoping that he breaks through. It might not happen as a rookie, and it might not happen. It certainly might not happen in the first 4 weeks of his rookie year, but they'll be patient. And so if you're going to wait 18 months to trade for Dalton Kincaid, at minimum, you're going to have to give up whatever the person who initially drafted Kincaid gave up to get him. So if it was 7th overall in the rookie draft, that's where your first offer has to be. You cannot go to him and say, I'm going to give you a second-round pick for Kincaid before his second season or in the middle of his second season and expect to get that deal done unless he's absolutely sucked and or he's gotten significantly hurt.
Yeah, and maybe that's true, but I don't feel like Kyle Pitts doesn't cost as much as he did.
Have you tried to acquire Kyle Pitts?
It's really hard to acquire Kyle Pitts.
I mean, he was
no
like
one who drafted Kyle
round
Pitts is giving him up
startup pick. He was just drafted at like pick 37 in our startup.
No one's going to take a second
pick.
round rookie pick for him.
Oh, not a second round rookie pick. He was 101 value to people.
Well, we're also talking about a super flex league for our league for big.
Right.
Yeah.
But, no, I agree. Nobody's going to take a second-round rookie pick for Kyle Pitts, who was in the 101 discussion.
Right.
But I do think people might take a late first for Kyle Pitts now.
Maybe,
yeah.
They might. They almost certainly will after this year.
But your thought would maybe be you can trade a late or mid 2 or something for Kincaid next offseason?
Right, and that's okay. I think that's the problem. Like, I'm not actually that convinced, and that's what I wonder from you guys. Do you think that Dalton Kincaid could get into the Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce range of tight end production, or are you thinking this guy might be T.J. Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert? Because if it's
I'm
T.J.
thinking-
Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, I just like if that's what I might miss out on, but I'm giving up a first round pick for it, I'm okay with that.
So I'm more in the first tier. Obviously not Travis Kelce, that's Hall of Fame tier, but like maybe and he doesn't have a similar profile to Mark Andrews, but again, just like from a production standpoint, I do think that because he can get open in the intermediate range really easily, and he has after the catch ability, and then Josh Allen attached him for at least 5 years.
I'd argue that he's got a better profile than Mark Andrews because he's a full-time pass catcher. He's not a blocker. And Andrews runs a ton of routes too, so it's not like it's really that big of a difference. The argument against Kincaid, honestly, is this. If he struggles this year and then next year he begins to play and he really doesn't break out, he'll be 25 years old
He is
by
old.
Halloween next year.
And
So you almost need to see, you know what? You might not want to trade for Dalton Kincaid 18 months from now if he doesn't get the job done. I think if you need a tight end in your dynasty league, you want somebody who's a difference maker. I personally felt like Kincaid was the 5th best pass catcher in this draft. And I think that's what Buffalo saw too. And next year could be that year for him where we see as a rookie, he has some breakout games, but next year he could really be just an absolute smash at tight end because there's no Gabe Davis there. I think he's their Gabe Davis replacement plus in that offense going into next year.
I do too.
Okay, Dan, we'll move on to question number 2. I knew that nobody would really like where I had Kincaid ranked, and when we get to 13 through 24, you guys will probably poo-poo on it again. But JSN versus Jordan Addison, I've gone back and forth on this, Dan. Dave kind of already talked about how he's feeling about JSN. Do you think, like, Addison's putting together some highlights as well? He is unbelievable as a route runner. I'm not sure how anybody's going to cover him with Justin Jefferson on the other side of the field. Do you think that both of these guys could be big-time risers in terms of overall dynasty rankings, Dan? Could these both be top 12 dynasty wide receivers soon?
I definitely think both these guys are going to be big risers. I have an opinion on which one I would prefer to have, but as far as if they're going to rise or not, I think both are on the trajectory. Both will cost a lot more next year than they cost now. For me, short term, I think Addison might be a little bit more productive in fantasy given the situation you reference, Heath, playing across from Justin Jefferson, which he'll get for 5 years at least. But long term, I do like Jaxon Smith-Njigba a lot better. I like him much better as a prospect on paper, not just on paper, on tape. I think his ability to separate in the slot is uncanny, and it's probably, I mean, you look at how he ran that 3-cone drill. It was in the elite range of Wes Welker and those types of slot receivers, yet he's a much bigger player. And in my opinion, he has a bigger catch radius as well. So I think he's just kind of a unique prospect versus an Addison, to me, Heath, who on film was not very unique prospect. I liked his Pitt film better than I liked his USC tape. I think ultimately he played a little outside in college. He's not going to be a great outside receiver in the NFL, probably more of a slot guy and just not as much of a unique player. So to me, JSN is the much better long-term play for Dynasty. But early on, Addison has the better situation. So will we look at this next year like it costs less to get JSN than it does Addison? Should I have played it that way? And that kind of goes back to the first question with Kincaid as far as like when you want to buy in on these players.
Dave, another duo of wide receivers I've gone back and forth on, Zay Flowers and Quentin Johnston. I don't know how many times I've flipped these guys, but for now I have Zay Flowers at the top again. Reports that he looks like the best wide receiver in Baltimore. I kind of expect him to be the number 1 wide receiver in Baltimore.
Me too.
Quentin Johnston, it's a combination of him high pointing balls and tweets about his drops, which is probably what his season is going to be as well. Do you have a strong feeling on Flowers versus Johnston this year or long term?
I have Flowers over Johnston both this year and long term, but it's not a big gap between them. And if you prefer Johnston because you know that Justin Herbert's going to be his quarterback for the foreseeable future, then I get it and you can go with him. But I like that Zay Flowers is just we talked about Addison and how tough he is to cover. Same thing with Zay Flowers. We've been talking about it literally for the last 4 months about how well Zay Flowers can separate, how he can beat double coverage. I wish that Lamar was a little bit more of an accurate passer on throws of 15 plus yards downfield. We've seen him not connect consistently with these types of wide receivers in that range. But I also think that Zay Flowers is the perfect type of receiver that can catch a pass, make a guy miss, and then skid to the end zone. We saw that from Bateman on a play last year against Miami. More of that in this offense, please. And the direction that this offense is going in, where they want to throw more and they want to make it easy on Lamar to make those throws, it's going to be that spread. I think that's going to help Zay Flowers as well. I think he's the one that I'd rather put my chips on, even though he's a year older than Quentin Johnston.
Dan, when you look at these bottom three, and I know you'd have Kincaid over all three of these guys, but Jonathan Mingo, Zach Charbonnet, Devon Achane, which one should not be in the top 12? And how do you feel about Achane versus Charbonnet?
Well, I might not have Kincaid over Charbonnet. That one would be close to me. The one who should not be in the top 12 for me is Jonathan Mingo. I think he's been propped up in Dynasty rankings a little too high based on landing spot. The actual film is okay at best. I felt like he was not a receiver in this class who I liked. I tried to come on to him at the end. People, make the A.J. Brown comparisons, but I don't think he's nearly as physical as Brown, and that's especially true not like in the middle of the route, but like right off the line of scrimmage when you need to create separation. That's something AJ Brown does really a good job of using his body and his body strength to do. I felt like Mingo wasn't as good at that, and I don't think he has the same kind of vertical ability as an AJ Brown type. So I just didn't really love him as a prospect. I felt like once he got drafted to Carolina and we saw all the hype about, like Steve Smith told them to draft him and all that stuff, and they don't really have any true weapons around him at receiver that people are too worried about. On that depth chart, people propped him up, but for me, I didn't love him. And as far as Charbonnet versus Achane, I really like both, so it's hard for me to really. I have Charbonnet a bit higher, but Achane's one of those guys who people give him the profile of this is just a speed back. But when you really look at him, he plays a lot. He wins in between the tackles more than most people would expect for a player his size. And before the draft, I did say this to Adam, and Adam wouldn't let me talk about this, Heath, on FFT. He's like, no, Achane's going to be a career punt returner. You can't bring him up. But I said, if I can think of one perfect fit from a system standpoint, it's Devin Achane in that one-cut zone blocking team in Miami. It's the perfect schematic fit, Achane in that blocking team. So I have to get excited about that.